Tow truck operators work a lot of night shifts. Highways never sleep, and neither do breakdowns, accidents, or cars abandoned in dangerous positions. When the call comes in, they go. But the work isn't just about hooking up a vehicle and driving away. There's a system built around every pickup, procedures designed to reduce risk, avoid liability, and keep traffic moving. Most drivers follow it. Some don't. And at night, when visibility drops and response times stretch longer, the gap between protocol and improvisation shows up fast. This isn't about dramatic failures. It's about what actually changes when someone skips a step that seemed optional. Night calls usually mean one of three things: a breakdown on the shoulder, a collision blocking a lane, or a vehicle that's been sitting in a no-park zone for hours. The environment matters more than people think. Darkness compresses depth perception. Reflective vests and flashing amber lights help, but they don't eliminate blind spots. Drivers approaching at highway speed often don't process what they're seeing until they're much closer than they realize. Tow operators arrive on scene with a mental checklist. Park behind the disabled vehicle with lights on. Set up cones or flares if the situation allows. Assess the vehicle position. Check for fluid leaks, deployed airbags, or structural damage. Document the vehicle condition with photos. Communicate with dispatch. Hook up. Clear the scene. That's the routine. It exists because every action reduces a variable. Cones create a buffer zone. Photos prevent disputes later. Communication ensures someone knows where the driver is and what they're dealing with. Routine doesn't guarantee safety, but it narrows the range of things that can go wrong. At night, this routine becomes even more rigid. There's less ambient light to work with, fewer witnesses if something goes sideways, less margin for error when a car drifts into the shoulder at 70 miles per hour. Experienced operators move through the steps without thinking about them. They don't debate whether the cones are necessary. They just deploy them. But some drivers skip steps. Maybe they've done 1,000 pickups without incident. Maybe the shoulder looks wide enough. Maybe they're running behind and don't want to spend an extra 3 minutes. Whatever the reason, they make a judgment call. Protocol becomes optional. The decision to skip protocol usually happens in the first 30 seconds on scene. The operator pulls up, sees the vehicle, and mentally evaluates the situation. Is this a quick hook? Is traffic light? Is the shoulder wide enough to work without additional protection? If the answer feels like yes, some drivers just start working. They back up to the vehicle, get out, attach the chains or lift and load it. No cones, no second check with dispatch, no buffer zone. They're betting that the few minutes they save won't cost them anything. This decision is driven by a few factors. Time pressure is the obvious one. Tow companies often handle multiple calls per shift, and efficiency matters. But there's also familiarity. Drivers who have worked the same highway for years start to feel like they know it. They recognize the traffic patterns. They know which shoulders are safer. They assume their instincts are good enough. Another factor is visibility bias. If nothing bad has happened in the past, the brain starts treating the protocol as excessive. The cones seem like theater. The extra photos feel redundant. The driver starts to believe the routine was designed for someone less experienced. But night work resists assumptions. Traffic flow at 2 a.m. isn't predictable the way it is at 2 p.m. A car that seemed far away can close distance faster than expected. A driver who's been on the road for 10 hours doesn't react the same way a fresh driver does. And the tow operator, focused on the vehicle in front of them, isn't scanning for approaching headlights the way they would in full daylight. When protocol is ignored, the operator is trading known risk mitigation for perceived efficiency. They're not trying to create danger. They're just prioritizing speed over structure. But that trade only works if nothing unexpected happens. The official protocol is written down somewhere, in training manuals, company handbooks, or state regulations. But the unwritten rules are what actually govern behavior on scene. One unwritten rule: never assume the shoulder is safe just because it looks wide. Width doesn't matter if a vehicle drifts. Experienced operators know that impaired drivers, distracted drivers, and drowsy drivers all gravitate toward the shoulder without realizing it. Cones and flares don't stop that, but they create a visual boundary that increases reaction time. Another rule: always take more photos than you think you need. Disputes about pre-existing damage are common. A customer might claim the tow caused a dent that was already there. An insurance company might question the vehicle's condition at pickup. Photos don't just protect the operator, they close gaps in the story before anyone can insert a different version. A third rule: communicate with dispatch even if it feels unnecessary. If something goes wrong, dispatch needs to know where the driver is and what they're dealing with. A missed check-in can mean a delayed response if the operator gets hurt or stuck. It's not paranoia, it's contingency planning. These rules exist because experienced operators have seen what happens when they're ignored. They've watched a car drift into the work zone. They've been blamed for damage they didn't cause. They've waited too long for help because no one knew where they were. The rules aren't based on hypotheticals. They're based on patterns that repeat often enough to matter. Drivers who skip protocol often haven't been in the job long enough to see those patterns, or they've been lucky enough to avoid them. Either way, they're operating with incomplete information. They don't know what they don't know. When a tow driver ignores protocol, a few things change. First, the buffer disappears. Without cones or flares, there's no visual warning for approaching traffic. That doesn't mean an accident will happen, but it does mean the operator is relying entirely on other drivers to notice them and react in time. Second, documentation gaps create liability exposure. If a customer claims damage and there are no photos, the operator's word is all they have. Some companies back their drivers in those situations. Others don't. Either way, it's a vulnerability that didn't need to exist. Third, communication gaps slow down response if something goes wrong. If an operator is hit, injured, or stranded, dispatch needs to know immediately. A missed check-in can delay help by minutes or longer. In night work, that delay matters. None of this is guaranteed to happen. Plenty of drivers skip protocol and complete the job without incident. They load the vehicle, clear the scene, and move on to the next call. But the repetition matters. Over hundreds of calls, the odds shift. A driver who never uses cones will eventually be on scene when a distracted driver drifts into the shoulder. A driver who doesn't take photos will eventually face a dispute they can't prove. A driver who doesn't check in will eventually need help that takes too long to arrive. The consequences aren't always immediate. That's part of why the pattern persists. If nothing bad happens, the driver assumes the protocol was unnecessary. But night shift work doesn't reward shortcuts the way other jobs might. The variables are too unpredictable. The margin for error is too narrow. Protocol exists because the work is repeatable but the environment isn't. Tow operators handle similar calls every night, but no two scenes are identical. The routine is designed to account for that variability. When drivers ignore it, they're betting that experience and instinct are enough. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. The difference shows up slowly, across dozens or hundreds of calls until the pattern breaks. Night shift road work doesn't punish bad decisions immediately. It just waits. And the people who have been doing it long enough know that waiting is the point.